call to order this workshop for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, April 18th, 2023. This is to cover drainage and kind of a learning session, if you will, for the board. So, Kevin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Kevin Moore, City Engineer. I'm not a teacher, so if I go over anything and there are questions, please feel free to stop me and we can hopefully address those. I want everybody to walk away with kind of the same knowledge base this evening. So we're going to go over precipitation, some of the things we look at in drainage design with our storm sewer, things like that for incoming projects, and then also mention a couple of proposed updates for the drainage manual moving forward. So starting with precipitation, there are three main things we really look at. So we look at how much rain falls, we look at the intensity it falls, and then we look at how much is running off the surface versus how much is soaking in, and that's dependent on the slope as well as the actual makeup of the soil. So Drake Field in Fayetteville has about 70 years worth of rainfall data that we have available to us. And the average over that time is 46 inches over the last 70 years. That does vary quite a bit from year to year, but if you'll look, it also varies quite a bit even across our area. So in 2019, Fayetteville received 65 inches of rain that year for total year's rainfall. And we have two rain gauges in Siloam that were reporting at that time. At the wastewater treatment plant, we had about 84 inches that same year. And then a gauge on the south side of town had about 74 inches over that year. And mostly that's kind of due to the supercell style storms that we get in this area. Looking at the 100-year storm map of our area, it's influenced a little bit by the Ozarks. And then also as you move south, you get some more tropical rain patterns. As you get into Louisiana, you're dealing with more 14, 16-inch rainfalls in the 100-year storm. We deal with 8.9 inches. That's our design storm for the 100-year. And it's important to know the 100-year storm is not a storm that we only have to deal with once every 100 years. So since we had one in 1974, we don't need to worry about one again. It's any given year, you have about a 1% chance of a storm of that magnitude. So just kind of an example of what that looks like. In 1974, the flood that we received on June 8th, there were about 3 inches of rain in that half-hour period, which is kind of well within a 100-year intensity that we look at, as well as 9.09 inches in 24 hours, so even exceeding our 100-year design storm in that case. NOAA has put together a lot of rainfall data with some different intensities and time lines. So typically for intensity, we're looking at 15 minutes and 60 minutes. And then for our design for detention basins and things like that, when volume becomes an issue, we're looking at the 24-hour storm. So, and flash flooding is typically 6 hours or less. And then aerial flooding is more than 6 hours. And so those are kind of the intensity differences we're looking at. The last thing we really need to consider for our drainage design is the soil that we have, as well as the slope of those soils. So we primarily have clay soils, which makes a difference for erosion, but also the amount of water that runs off, especially when clay soils are wet. So in an extended period of rain, if we get, say, 4 inches of rain, and it's dry, Sager Creek's not going to have the same amount of water in it as if we get 4 inches of rain after some smaller rain events that have kept everything saturated. So for our example here, this is from our drainage criteria manual. We're looking at just flat sites right now. And these are, here in the right column, these are percentages. And so for pasture, undeveloped pasture, about 40% of the rain that hits would run off and the other 60% would be absorbed. For something like a commercial development, 90% would run off and only about 10% is going to be absorbed. Those are averages. We do have other averages available for different residential densities. So a subdivision that has quarter-acre lots is going to have a different impact than a subdivision with 1-acre lots, and those are things that we account for as well. So when we're starting to look into design, we're dealing with a lot of water in these calculations. So acre inch or acre foot is typically used, and that's the amount of rainfall. If you have 1 inch of rain across 1 acre, you'd have an acre inch of rain, and that's about 27,000 gallons. So these are really large numbers, kind of hard to comprehend in some cases, especially like in the Sager Creek Basin. And then we're also dealing with flow rate, typically cubic feet per second, which is about 450 gallons per minute. Again, it's a lot of water. So if we have an example acre that's undeveloped for pasture land with clay soils like in our area, we can expect 0.4 acre inches to run off. That's that 40% of rain that hits. And then 60% would soak in and infiltrate and get out through the groundwater that way. We have our study point at the bottom where we would typically design and consider the impacts of our site. And then the time it takes for all that water from the very top corner to reach the bottom is our time of concentration. So that varies by site, and that will change as we develop the land as well. So we're really looking at protecting the public health and safety and welfare with these projects. And so our goal is not to increase the peak flow. So if you have a driveway with a 24-inch pipe underneath it and your neighbor develops, our goal and what we target is for all that water to still drain under that 24-inch pipe when they're done. There are some ways to do that. Typically, it's by detention. So we have here hydrograph. This is what we look at to determine the flows that we're dealing with, volume, and the amount of water that's coming off a site. So we have our peak in the middle. This would be before development. Again, if we have an acre of pasture land, this would be 40% of the water that hits that land. And then as we develop, that peak would be exceeded. So as we're at the pre-development stage, we haven't really developed anything yet. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Betsy, want to pull your mic down? Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I forgot. Under paved, it's 0.9% and 0.10 or 10% absorbs. How does that absorb into pavement?
So that's an average for a commercial site. So you would have 10% typically through green space of some kind. So we have those averages just kind of to base things off of. They can also go in and get site specific as far as the square footage of paving versus the square footage of green space, parking islands, things like that add up. So those would be specific to this site. That 0.9 is kind of a general commercial development number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Anyone else at this point? No? Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Okay. So we develop our site, again, 1 acre. So before we have the blue hydrograph, 40% running off, and now we have the red hydrograph, 90% running off. So we've brought that peak sooner, and we've increased the amount of water that's actually leaving the site by paving it. So by channelizing the water, we've increased the speed that it moves through the site, simply so that we can get it away from buildings and things like that more efficiently. And so if we have our paved site, again, we've eliminated the ability to infiltrate a lot of that water. Again, only about 10% kind of on average is making it through. And the other 90% we have to now deal with in some way. So we've increased the water from our pasture by 125% just by the development itself. So we have two main options for dealing with that. So it's either detention or retention. Most cases we don't really have a retention. We don't have retention as an option just because of the soils that we have. To my knowledge, we don't have any retention ponds in the city. We have standard detention or wet detention that would always stay wet, but it's not functioning as a retention pond. So we have the flows that we have to deal with are limited to the original peak from the pre-developed site. And so in green, you can see kind of a mock discharge from our detention basin. So this would be limited at the peak, but we still have to get rid of that extra double the amount of water. And so now we're doing it over a longer period of time by limiting it to that value. So it's held much longer, typically several hours longer. We do require that detention basins drain dry within 72 hours to prevent mosquitoes and pests and things like that. So unless it's designed as a wet detention, it'll be dry within 72 hours, but it is still extending that peak. So another option is to reduce the area draining to a point. So here we have the Mission Hill subdivision. This is a good example because they have 3 points that the water drained to prior to when they developed the site. And so they took that 8.1 acres in the northwest corner, and they actually drained most of that east towards primarily the northeast detention pond. So they a little more than doubled the actual area draining to that pond, but because they've also paved and things like that, it actually receives 4 times the amount of water. And so that detention pond is oversized because of that, so that the peak is still meeting the amount that was discharged before the site was developed. Another thing we look at in design is the spread of water in the streets. So streets can't pond water, but while it is actively raining, the water goes through the street from inlet to inlet. In the 100-year storm, based on the classification of street, the larger the street is, the more lanes you have to keep open. And so for an arterial street, you'd be required to keep 2 full 12-foot lanes open, one in each direction. Collector streets have to maintain 1 lane fully clear in the 100-year. And then for local and smaller streets, they're allowed to flood the street while it's actively raining, as long as it doesn't flood out of the street. So they can't exceed the curb and have the water leave the right of way. But the water, the spread that they're allowed determines how far apart those inlets are. And that'll of course vary case by case on the site. So storm sewers, once we get the water in the ground, we have 2 main design points. And we're looking at the 10-year storm, which is 6.1 inches in 24 hours. And that should only use 80% of the actual line's capacity. And then it should also have enough slope to it that we can have a minimum velocity to keep the pipe clean. So ideally, these would be self-cleaning, removing the sediment out with that scour intentionally. And then for the 100-year storm, the water can actually exceed the height of the pipe in an inlet or in a box, as long as it's not spilling back up into the street. So you can actually pressurize the line more or less to get some additional capacity out of it that way. So detention basins, a lot of times we get asked about why detention basins aren't full, and the easiest answer is it's kind of like a marathon. So if you use up all your space kind of early on in the smaller rain events, you don't have enough volume left for the large 100-year storms, which again is 8.9 inches. So really in a 2-year or 10-year storm, if we're only getting 4 inches or so of rain, there should only be a foot or 2 in the bottom of a detention pond, just kind of on average. There really shouldn't be a whole lot. Even in a 100-year storm, we require a foot of freeboard within the detention pond. So as kind of a safety net, the top of that water surface elevation should have an additional foot of empty space above it before you actually overtop the banks. And then we have overflows to control the water if an outlet structure were to be clogged. It controls where the water goes somewhere safe, and then it also prevents erosion. If the water overtopped the banks everywhere at once, it would start to wear small paths that would get bigger until you had some sort of catastrophic failure. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. So we also size for water quality. So for 1 inch of rain, that first inch of rainfall usually carries the majority of your pollutants, your oils and sediments and trash and things like that. And so we have a small opening at the bottom of our newer detention ponds to hold back that first inch of rainfall and drain it out more slowly, because grass is really kind of the most effective filter that we have in a lot of cases. Some additional things to consider: not everywhere requires detention, just based on where it is compared to Sager Creek. So for example, as you get to the west side of town, really close to Sager Creek, some of those areas might not need to detain. Historically, JBU has kind of fallen under that category, and there are a couple subdivisions on the west side of town that have as well. But the goal with those is to get the water out through Sager Creek before the rest of Sager Creek, the rest of that basin is contributing. So we're trying to basically keep it clear. So for example, if we were to detain on JBU, those flows are additive, and so we've actually made things worse by overlapping when our water's discharging from JBU into Sager Creek. And so we allow them to get their water out early. A lot of sites on that side of town are allowed to get they have to prove that this is the way to do it for their site, but they're allowed to get their discharge out of the way before Sager Creek rises and causes additional flooding that way. So are there any questions about that portion of the design?
No?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I don't understand. When you say it gives them a chance to get their water out of the way, what do you mean?
So Sager Creek has a fairly large basin. It takes a few hours for the water kind of in the northwest corner to really make its way through to the state line. And so anything that's adding flows at that point is being added into the water at Sager Creek. And so, for example, if say JBU discharges 100 gallons a minute.
Now, when you say that, do you mean because it just rained and it's happening naturally?
Right.
Or they're, okay.
Right, yeah. So it rains, let's say it rains across our whole area, and it takes, let's say it takes 3 hours to get from that northeast corner all the way down to state line. So if JBU has not gotten rid of all their water by the time that peak gets there, then they're adding to the problem. And so we're trying to get their water out of the way before everything else kind of contributes to that. And Sager Creek is kind of at its full height. So we're kind of strategically trying to determine when is the best time to get that water out.
So how do they get their water out of the way?
JBU doesn't have any detention on their site. So, and there are a couple subdivisions on that west side of town without detention as well. So their water leaves Arkansas basically before the water from like Bill Young Road and some of those other areas gets to that point.
Okay. So then if it didn't, then you'd have to do something. But right now it's working fine.
Right. If it didn't, we would have more water in Sager Creek than we do today. Yeah.
And Madam Mayor, if
Yes.
the audience has questions, can they ask questions too during this, or is that at the end?
I would say that whenever we get to the end and
Okay.
you all have asked your questions, if we still have time. And then, of course, whenever we have our regular meeting, we have public input time, that
Okay.
they are welcome then to make comments or questions at that time. Uh-huh.
Any other questions? Okay. So some other things that happen during construction: the city of Siloam Springs is an MS4, which means we're responsible for the enforcement of erosion control plans. Any site that disturbs more than an acre has to get a SWIP, and that's a state permit, basically just proving that they have taken into account the erosion that their site will have during construction, and they have a documented plan to address that. So they're really targeting a sediment, track out, concrete washout, and fuel storage, things like that. Again, with the clay soils that we have, not only do they prevent a lot of infiltration. They're also really hard to get out of the water once it's taken up in the drainage. So as things erode, it's really important to keep the clay stabilized to prevent a lot of those particles from getting in the water to begin with. So all we can really do is stabilize or filter it out. So clay takes about 100 days to settle through a foot of water, as opposed to something like sand that can do that in 2 or 3 minutes. So it really, we really have to keep it out of the water to begin with to have an effective erosion control plan. So for any sites over an acre, they file a grading permit with us, and they include their SWIP, their erosion control plan, with that. They get to choose to inspect the site either every 7 or every 14 days. Most choose 7. The 14-day requirement comes with some additional things they have to keep up with. They have to have a rain gauge on site. Anytime they get more than a 1/4 inch of rain, they have to inspect it within 24 hours, regardless of when that is. So if it rains Thursday and Saturday, they have to have somebody out there Friday and then again on Sunday in order to be compliant with their permit. So we inspect these sites on about a monthly basis, making sure that they're keeping up with their inspection forms, that the forms feel thorough, that we're not seeing anything during our inspection that seems to be missed regularly, and that their items, they have to list their maintenance items on their inspection form, that those are being completed. They have 72 hours to address anything that they catch, as well as anything that we would catch on the site. So we would note anything and send that to their designated person for anything that we note on site that's out of compliance. They had 3 days to address it. If it's still not fixed, then we issue a notice of violation, and they have another 3 days, and then failure again would result in a notice to comply, and they'd have 3 more days. And if they still, after all this, choose not to bring their site into compliance, we would issue a stop work order. And so they would be the only personnel they can have on site. The only construction activities they could do at that point is specifically to fix their erosion controls and lift that stop work order. So it's important for you guys to know this, because the only way to lift a stop work order is either to complete the items that are listed or to appeal it to the board. And so I want you to know if a stop work order ever comes to the board, all these things have taken place, and there's more or less a paper trail that these things have been out of compliance for some time. So those are kind of our current requirements as they are today. Do you guys have any questions about those before we talk about future changes?
Don, you have some comments?
Yeah, Kevin's doing a great job, but I wanted to make sure you understand now is where we're switching and saying, here's some things we think we can do to address some of the things we've seen before. A couple of things I think would be important for us to note, that some of the challenges we see today and some of the complaints we get are from older subdivisions. And back, I want to say years ago, stormwater was treated as a nuisance, and it was to get it out of town as quick as possible. So what Kevin talked about here about us having an MS4 is now not all cities try to separate their stormwater from their wastewater. We're doing that at this point. I think it's important to understand at this juncture, before Kevin goes into what's already in our drainage criteria manual that we think can address some of these issues, is that currently in today's world there's a regulatory gap. We have, I would say, the EPA looks at water quality. That's what they're focused on through the Clean Water Act. FEMA and U.S. Corps engineers typically looking at risk as it relates to flood, rivers, and coastal. There's really not a lot as it relates to what do cities need to deal with their stormwater. And I'll bring to your attention, there was even an article this week, I believe, an Arkansas Democrat talking about stormwater and the issues that it's going to create for Northwest Arkansas as a region as we continue to grow. Some of it people would think is due to development, but what we're also seeing is that the rain models has changed. And so the data we were using years ago to try to calculate rainfall totals has drastically changed. So what Kevin is going to show you, I will tell you, I don't think, and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in Northwest Arkansas is currently looking at going to this standard. And so typically cities shy away from that. They want to know what the other jurisdiction is going to be doing if they're going to hold them to that. So this will institute a change, and this is one that I've said before that, it's going to be a different look for these developers and their engineers, and you may hear about it at that point. So I want to make sure I slow this down, and before he switches that, there might be somebody standing at this lectern in a couple years or in a couple months saying, why do we have to do this? And our answer to that is to address the challenges we're seeing and the ones we see coming. Director Blair's done a great job forwarding us a lot of these concerns we're hearing from the public. And, staff, our posture now is we're going to stand firm. We're going to stand firm. And if they come to the board at the development phase and, say staff is being unfair or pushing a lot on them, this is the change that you're getting ready to see. And hopefully, Kevin, slow it down just a little bit to help them understand, because it's already in our drainage criteria manual and subject to your approval. And you said, hey, we support y'all in doing that. We just want to prepare you that you're probably going to hear from the other side, the development world, of saying, we got to do more. Yes, we're asking them to do more because we're trying to, I've said it's Director Blair, there are times we're standing in people's yards and we're scratching our head going, I'm not really sure why they allowed that. Our goal is that 25 years from now, no one's standing there saying, why did they allow that to happen? And so we think this change already being in our drainage criteria manual, we won't have to change anything. We just need to start enforcing it. So I just wanted to slow that down and bring it to your attention before he switches gears. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So any questions at this point for Kevin after those comments? No? Then Kevin?
Oh, can I go ahead? I'm sorry.
Sure, I'm
I
sorry.
didn't-
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
No, go ahead.
I have some questions from when Don introduced us at the last meeting. He said that we inspect our ponds yearly. Do we have documentation on those inspections and results that we could post online for citizens? Because I know there's some areas, like, I know there's some people in the audience, I've dealt with a lot of people in the audience right now. And like there's one over there by Gates, that retention pond over there. And when we went to look at it, there was huge ruts that, there was kids four-wheeling in it and stuff like that. Do we have that documentation where citizens can look at those results online?
I don't believe we have that available today, but that's certainly something we could look at adding. So my understanding is more if problems are found, then those are like pictures are taken and the fixes are documented more so than documentation regardless of whether it passes or not. But that's certainly something we can look at doing.
Because I was curious if we could line up some of the issues that we've been dealing with for a while now. And when you consider a neighborhood, a subdivision older, what do you consider an older subdivision?
Be very cautious here.
So not to insult anybody. I'm just curious.
Right. So I'll give you an example. We were made aware of a drainage issue on a subdivision that's over off of Helena. And I want to say that was probably developed in the very early 90s. And what we realized was there was a home at the end of the cul-de-sac that was getting a lot of water and couldn't figure out why until we went back to the plans in the early 90s when it was first brought through as a preliminary plat. I believe that lot was supposed to be a detention pond. Somewhere along that same time, I want to say 91, maybe 92, it was changed and they were allowed to change it into a buildable lot and they built upon it. So that's what I mean, that some of these things, as we go back and do the history and research, we figure out like, wait, again, why did they allow that to happen? I have no idea. It was before we were here. But those are some of the things we try to make sure that we don't allow happening on our watch. And so some of these are going to be built in the 80s. Some, drainage problems we looked at last week, I think that subdivision was from the 70s. And so that is typically sometimes the age of when we see some of these inherited problems that, either was already there and then they now have been exacerbated with other developments. And so the water's moving through at a quicker rate. And then it gets to this older subdivision that's not adequately prepared to handle it, and then it slows down. And so some of these fixes are potentially quick. We can look at one property and say we can address it. Some are large because if it's an entire drainage channel, yes, we may fix it at point B, but it's going to cause problems at point Z. So then we have to slow down and look and then allow them to do the calculations of the days totals and figure out what that ultimate fix is, and then go through the regulatory process to try to address them.
Okay, is that the circumstances that you were doing over there by the DMV, the big drainage behind that subdivision? It started, but it never finished. So is it because of the issues down the line, or is it?
So when you say the one by the DMV, so there's a pond back by the DMV. Are you talking about Brentwood maybe on the other?
Behind Kathy's Corner.
Brentwood, yeah. So
Is that because there was issues down the line, or?
no,
Because
I
it started,
don't.
but we haven't finished it.
I don't think so. And we mentioned that we believe, staff believes that's one we need to bring back to you and say it needs to be done by our contractor, because that's the same staff that is required to deal with streets. That's also the same staff that if we say, hey, there is a drainage pond over here that needs to be addressed, we're taking them off that project and moving them over there. So I believe, Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, we're coming back to you soon to say, hey, this needs to be handled by an outside contractor, bring it to you in a budget amendment so it can get done and get completed, instead of us trying to move crews around. Kind of the same thing I relate it to when we talk about drainage problems that are happening today. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to engineering. They're reviewing the new subdivisions, doing all that review, and then they're doing design work as well. And so, at some point we're going to have to say, we can't do it all, and this here we can outsource. So that particular one, Brentwood, yes, the goal, and I don't want to speak for Steve, he can speak for himself. The goal is to bring that back to you to accelerate it so we can get completed, because some of the concerns that we have is at the rate it is, that if we have a large enough rain event, it could probably blow out the walls that are there now.
Really?
So we really want to try to get that completed.
Okay, because I get a lot of calls from people in that subdivision still today, and we did have a meeting with them here at City Hall, specifically for them, that explained the process.
Yep.
And they came and they were excited, and then the process started, and then it stopped, and they haven't heard anything.
Right.
And so they're frustrated.
Right. Understand. And so I think it's going to be a shift in mindset. One being, when we have projects such as those that we know are large, we probably need to contract them out so we can get them done sooner rather than later, and allow that staff to stay with maintaining what we already have instead of constructing new. But I'll let Steve speak to that.
Steve Gorzak, Public Works Director. Since Don brought it up, I'm working on a request for proposals for contractors to do the Brentwood project. Where I'm hung up right now, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get around this, is we already have a certain amount of money budgeted. So how do you propose a contractor to bid the project when you know how much money you've got, but you don't know how far that takes you? You know what I'm saying? Like 100, for instance, let's say we have $100,000. How much does $100,000 buy? Does it only go 100 feet, 10 feet? So I'm trying to get some idea of what that's going to be, so that when a contractor does bid it, that they're bidding it in a way that we can afford to pay it. So it's being worked on. The other question about the detention ponds and maintenance and that type of thing, we don't have anything posted on the website, and I'll take a look at what we have and see if we can, because what we have is a checklist, and we've got the city divided into quadrants, four quadrants, and the street staff go around and either inspect or correct areas, drainage thing, whether it's ditches or detention ponds or what have you, in various quadrants of the city. So some citizens will see that their ditch was dug up at the street in their front yard. That's largely because either you've got a curve where you got a storm pipe under a driveway here and then one here, but the dirt does this, or you're only seeing so much of that storm pipe going under the driveway. So we clear the dirt out so that the water can get under there. So we make that correction, then we note it on this checklist. And then we turn around, and the next year, staff will go back to all these same locations and look at these again and say, how does this particular ditch look? If it's okay, just check okay and initial it and date it. So I can possibly post a blank checklist that we use just to give everybody an idea of how we're doing this. And then the ones that we're actually checking and marking all over, we'll just keep to ourselves. But yeah, we've got something in place.
Yes,
I
Carol.
have a question. Obviously, I'm not a drainage expert. And when these come before us, are there a few things that you could tell us that we should be looking for when we look at the drainage? Your experts are looking at the drainage plant, correct?
You got this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Do you
So-
understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So if I'll bring your attention to the last board meeting, there was, I believe Heritage Ranch Phase 4 and 5 came before you. Kevin came up, and what we're doing now, he's methodically slowing down at that point and coming up, handing it over from planning to talk about those study points and study areas in those subdivisions and what we looked at and what was being calculated and what the plan is to address those. So we absolutely are doing that now just to try to help get that information out. You guys ask great questions, and so it gets it out. And even if you know the answer, you do a good job of asking questions to make sure we say it publicly. But that's why he's coming up at that point and talking about those study points. And I don't want to rob any more of his time because I'd like for him to get to the fix and let you ask your questions about that and see what that could potentially change, because what he would do is also talk about how that will look different when they come through our process now, and we're looking at that drainage report.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
one more
Betsy.
quick question. Since we were talking about detention ponds, I know some are not owned by the city, some are private, all of that. Do they get inspected once a year? Is there some way to make sure they're being properly taken care of?
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of those larger commercial detention ponds, they're very well maintained. Typically, they're done by a contract. So just throwing out the big retail developer out there, Walmart, they have contractors that maintain theirs and then typically look at those issues and making sure they're performing the way they're supposed to. Because if they're not and they create an issue, we can hold them accountable to it. That's a great question. And that could be something too, that we can, put that document we gave to you last time online to help the public understand which ones are private and which ones are publicly maintained. When we look at trying to get that information directly asked about up there as well, we could probably get that there as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I would also add to that, one of our MS4 requirements is that every year we review the final controls, like detention ponds, for a certain number of sites. And so we pick those randomly, but we do go through and review that those are being properly maintained a certain number a year. So talking about some things moving forward, we have a requirement that if a downstream property from a development is not suited to handle the water coming off that development, that the developer can either choose to improve that property or over-detain in order to make that work. So if you have a 24-inch pipe under your driveway, again, and somebody develops upstream of you, they could choose to over-detain so that things still go through that line, or they could choose to come through and with your agreement, they could upsize your culvert under your driveway so that it would then work. So those are some options that are available to them. Some things we haven't been using this for, but would like to, is if volume or standing water is discovered to be an issue. So again, we've really taken this from a capacity standpoint, and we would like to begin looking at requiring developers to do offsite improvements if standing water is an issue. So if you have a flat property or a property with a dip in it that's holding water and it can't receive the extra volume that's being sent your way, then possibly requiring some sort of improvement there for the impact to their property, because even though they're reducing the peak, they're still sending more water your way. We'll also want to talk about volumetric detention, excess urban runoff volume, and full spectrum detention. Those are all kind of the same thing, with the goal of controlling the amount of water that's released in the first couple hours after a storm. And then also part of our 2040 comp plan is to have it's currently suggested and encouraged, but possibly requiring neighborhood amenities like parks and walking paths and benches and things like that as part of detention ponds. So with volumetric detention, our 24-hour storm typically peaks at 12 hours. That's basically the assumption we're making. So for an hour before that real peak and then 6 hours afterwards, our goal would be that there'd be no measurable impact from the 10-year storm. And so as it is today, we can begin enforcing this. And so for the first 6 hours after a storm, a 6-inch rain there would be no change to the amount of water leaving the site. So by designing for volume, you're automatically lowering the peak, typically even below pre-development. So they do hold more water in common rain events. Again, 6 inches is a lot to most people. And so even though it's not the 100-year storm we're ultimately designing for, those ponds will appear more full more regularly. Some downsides to that, kind of on the development side, they're typically between 10 and 25% larger. I would lean more towards the 10% with our current requirements, since we would only be requiring it for the 10-year storm. But if you think about a pond that's 4 feet deep, 10% is only a little under 5 more inches. So it's not a huge change, depending on how it's worked in. It does restrict their ability to redistribute drainage across the site. So like that Mission Hill site would have had to have been designed differently under this requirement. And that's either a pro or a con, depending on kind of how you look at that. But more ponds may be required in some cases. So this is kind of an example of what we might be looking at. So we have our pre-developed peak in blue, and then in purple, the solid area is that first 18 hours. So for 6 hours after the peak of our storm, we're releasing the same amount of water that was originally released from the site before we touched it. It still extends that discharge for several hours longer, but as the storm moves through, we're well below the amount of water that was originally being discharged from the site. And kind of to put that in perspective, red again would be kind of our typical site with a green discharge from a detention pond, and that purple is really what we would be looking at. So that volume, when the pond drains dry, still adds up to that whole 90% that we have, because again, without our retention ponds, we can't really let the water infiltrate. It still has to leave the site. But for that first 6 hours after a storm, no more water has left the site than what did before the site developed. So again, something like this would not be possible under that requirement. So instead of reducing the 8 acres and sending a portion of it northeast, they would have had to maintain something more along the lines of the existing distribution. And again, it's about 4 times the total amount of water that's now going to that northeast corner. So last thing I want to touch on, so for drainage complaints, we have a fix-it form online. If members of the public fill that out, it goes to multiple staff, so we can quickly determine if it's a clogged culvert or a ditch that needs to be regraded, or if something actually needs to be designed in order to fix a drainage problem. We'll also go out and determine if it's a public issue or a private issue. It's really on a case-by-case basis, but typically what we're looking for is things that are only kind of impacting one lot are usually more private-based. So if a neighbor builds their fence in a drainage easement or changes the grading on their lot, the city really doesn't get involved in things like that. Or where like groundwater is an issue, that's typically not when the city gets involved. We're dealing with more major channels. Now, if somebody built a fence in a major drainage channel, of course the city would get involved. But as things erode, as major drainage channels, if they're overflowing, those are the things that we really look out for. And then if water is coming from those major channels or from streets onto a property owner where it's not supposed to go, that's something that the city would get involved in. And it's important to know There'll always be some water. Some sites have historically received more than others. It's not what everybody wants to hear, but sometimes there's not something that can legally be done to relocate water off of somebody's site. So if they have a historic drainage channel on their site, then sometimes they could get multiple property owners maybe involved and kind of all in agreement to relocate the channel. But really, you're kind of limited to maintaining the water where it comes into your property and again where it leaves. And there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in most cases for those things. So some things for direction from you guys to staff, thinking about the volumetric detention, because again, that's something that we will get pushback on from developers. And then things like when standing water is an issue, and then moving forward with drainage manual changes to possibly require more volumetric detention in larger storm events, and then things like the public amenities around detention ponds. So if we could get some input on those, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Directors?
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
of course. Don and I spoke earlier in the week, and so he was able to answer some questions for me, but I thought some of them, and we talked about it, I was going to go ahead and ask again, so I don't know who would be most appropriate. Part of it is the difference between, and you touched on it, when it's a city issue versus a private citizen issue, because I know one area we were discussing, he guessed, and not saying for sure, but there are multiple houses involved, but said it could be it's a private issue. Can you elaborate some? Because I know some of the citizens are here who that area, it affects them.
Okay. Yeah, it's really just a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure, I don't know that I want to say it. So when standing water is an issue, if the water's coming off of kind of public property and then like hitting their property and it remains stuck there, then that may be something the city would get involved in. But if it's from private property to private property and it really has nowhere to go, that's not usually something that we would be spending public money to address.
And that might be kind of the situation. I don't know.
Yeah, just to elaborate, your question earlier this week was, how do we evaluate what's public and what's private? We have to go look. Some of the things we've seen in the past is that somebody has redirected their storm gutters and directed them towards an area that's already was sensitive. And at the same time, we've seen damming up of property with privacy fences. Not purposely, but just, I've got a dog, they like to dig, so I want my pickets to go all the way to the ground. Well, by doing that, you've kind of dammed up your own property. So if either way, we'll go out and we'll look and evaluate and try to make sure we have all the information before we make that determination if it's a public or a private issue. If it is a public issue and we believe that it's affecting private property, there are some things that has to happen. One, we have to get a drainage easement to allow us by law to work on that private property. And there have been times where we said, hey, we could fix this or address it, but it requires an easement for us to legally work on your property. And they say, I don't want to give you that easement. And so we're as far as we can go. But what Kevin said is true. If we try to figure out, is it affecting one or two, or if there's three, there are low-lying areas where water sits. And we had found from doing a little bit of research for those who would give us access to their property, something that has changed, or they made an addition without knowing that it was going to cause that impact. We bring those easements to you. Each board meeting, you get a ton of easements, and a lot of them are utility easements, some of them are drainage easements. And so that's why now we require fence permits. So typically what we do is if you come in and say, I'm getting ready to build my fence here, we check and make sure we know where those drainage easements are and say, you need to stay out of that, or give them guidance there. Where we just started that, I think 2 years ago. So over time, there's been some fences built where they shouldn't have been. And so we try to address those when we come across them.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
I was sent a question from an audience member, so I'm going to read it to you so you can answer it. Okay? Okay. How long is the developer responsible for the maintenance of the detention retention ponds? Does POA, HOA become responsible, or does city become responsible? Say 5 years after completion of a project, who is responsible for pond maintenance?
So in residential developments, when we go to that final plat acceptance and they come to you in the final plat, that's typically us taking over responsibility of that infrastructure. So streets, water and sewer, electrical, and a lot of times the detention. There are ones that are privately held by POAs or HOAs, and that's called out. And typically in their...
Those in Siloam?
Do we have some?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We have a couple in Ravenwood.
Okay.
And trying to think of... Is there one in Stonecrest? I think Stonecrest potentially has one too, and they have an active POA or HOA as well. We do know that there have been other cities in the region that have tried to go to that model of saying any new subdivision will be maintained by an HOA or a POA, and what they found over the years is they weren't properly maintained, and the city ends up going back into them. So we weren't looking at that model at all for those reasons. And to your point earlier, Director Risser, I think you brought up a good point about them being rutted up. And sometimes that was our own fault because we're trying to get in, we're trying to maintain them. And so we rut them up with our tractors in the weight, which is why in some of those areas we now use those remote mowers. So they don't cause that same impact and doesn't rut it up. And we can actually still get in and mow it without it having to be completely dry, because that's kind of the balance. Is if you wait for it to be completely dry, it's kind of out of control. So now we can get in there and hopefully not create some of those same issues on our own, just trying to maintain them a little bit as well. So did that answer your question? So as soon as you accept the final plat as a board and we accept it as a city, they're ours at that point to maintain.
Okay. I do have another question because I know there's people here in the audience regarding runoff they're not in city limits, but it's caused from city limits. How do we deal with citizens that are county residents, but the development we have created has caused them to be flooded?
Do you know which development that is specifically?
No, it's not a development. It's
Okay.
out. I don't know if the individual wants me to call them out or not. Yeah. So Rick Schoenberger, he could tell you about where it's at. I don't know an associated subdivision because it's over there by, what subdivision do you live in? Country Acres, and then the camp down there.
Yeah. So we would always be happy to take a look at. We may determine that it's not something the city can get involved in. It's case by case basis, and it's really maybe not as impacted by whether or not they're in city limits as it is whether or not it's a public issue.
Correct.
So they need to contact.
Right, because they would
Meeting.
theoretically be in our planning area, so we would possibly get involved that way.
Yeah, what Kevin's talking about is our extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ. And so if it's in our planning area and we can go out and look and affirm that, things change and it's attributed to maybe some certain development, we can look at trying to mitigate that. Obviously we would have to coordinate with the county and make sure they're on board with that as well. Where it gets a little dicey is when they're on our west side and it goes into another state. But typically, because I just bring that up because we've had some, on that side have some concerns. But when it's here, if we go and look at it, like Kevin said, and we can determine that maybe it is a public issue, we can try to get involved and work in coordination with the county to address it.
So when we meet with them, because we have met a little bit with them, but the county's never been involved in the conversations. At what point did you decide to involve the county in the conversations?
I would say when they have potential impacts to their infrastructure they maintain, roadways or something to that nature, then we would need to ask them about it. So for instance, let's say the water's coming across and it's supposed to go into a culvert, but that culvert is completely covered or is undersized and it's skipping the road. Now it's impacting that private property. We would go to the county and say, this needs to be addressed. Can we work together to try to mitigate that? Because we wouldn't have any rights to their infrastructure and changing it without their permission. It's a good question, though.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I have a
Reed.
question for Steve. For concerning the drainage, what I'm seeing from our city is that we have gone from a reactive state to a proactive with addressing these needs, and to be able to take that mammoth ball, so to speak, and just putting out fires and making it stop and go the other direction took a lot of effort.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And I want to bring up the idea of being able to do that outsource, where you're able to stay on top of this and be in a proactive mode. And if we have areas where we need to have some help from others so we can stay on top of it, I just want to say I'm definitely for that.
Yeah.
And so we can maintain our game plan and the strides that we have obtained. I know this was one of 3 areas out of 34 that didn't show well for us when we had our survey. But I do want to, and I know you know this, but I want to let everyone else know that there's a game plan out. You're not shooting from the hip. You're not just seeing what's happening today, but you've already got something in play to where we're looking to be on top of this and maintain this, so this city will stay in the realm that it sits in right now, which in my opinion is close to the top.
Thanks, Director Carroll. I do have to say I'm just part of a bigger group that has been working on this for quite some time.
Well, thank you for your group.
Thank you.
John?
I just wanted to take us back to the direction we're looking for. Again, this won't address some of the issues that are already out there. This is how we prevent those issues in the future. In our understanding is that the board would be supportive of switching to that 10-year excess urban runoff volume. Also looking at having input on off-site improvements where there's standing water, and then input to the future changes to look at the 2050 and 100-year storms. If you're supportive of that, we would take those next steps. Typically, probably what we want to do is meet with other engineers to make sure they understand we're looking, to make this change, and then kind of come back to you at a later date and say, starting September 1, here's how we're going to review all stormwater issues as it relates to new development. As it relates to historical things, it's like I explained to Director Blair, if people call, we'll go out and look. There is a break point. Honestly, if there's a lot, then we're going to be honest with them. We'll say, hey, it's going to take us some time to get back to you. There's a larger impact if it's multiple, larger channel. We're also very honest and say we'll give you an answer. It may not be the answer you want to hear, but we'll give you some sort of answer. And then ultimately, I think how we can address those is that each year in the budget, we can capture those. I think we're up to what, 19, 20? Somewhere between 19 and 20 that we're investigating currently today. And so those are not projects that we've set a budget for. So those ones that we think we need to address right now in this calendar year, we'll bring back to you with a budget amendment. Those that we think that we can prioritize and project out, we'll bring back to you during the budget and say, we've got a list of 19 or 20. Here's the highest priorities on that list. We can go do them all, and here's that cost, or we can kind of parcel them out and go get the most egregious ones first and then work our way down the list. And so I think that's what you'll see in the future is us bringing those to you and saying, after those investigations, after we've been contacted by residents, because we want to give them some type of solution as well. And it's ultimately, it'll be your pleasure of how we fund those and when we fund them, either through budget amendments. And again, those would be the ones we would think are the most egregious. Like, man, we can't wait till next year. We got to do something now. So we'll bring it to you with a potential budget amendment. And then there are ones that we think that are going to take a little bit more time, or same thing, not contracting out for the fixing or the construction, but we may have to contract out the engineering piece of it and say, I can think of one right now that I know we need an entire drainage study, because to fix that, it incorporates 4 or 5 different areas. And we're going to need a larger drainage study to make sure that we don't create an unintended consequence on somebody else downstream to fix those. So at this point, what we kind of want to hear is if you're okay with us moving in those directions on those 3 bullet points that are in front of you. One, the 10-year, model. So bringing volume into it. As Kevin said before, we just looked at peak. Now we're going to look at the volume of water, because we think that's typically what people are not used to. They knew water always came across this channel, but now they're seeing it at a greater volume. So we think we need to do something on the upstream side to hold back that volume. And then where there's already standing water issues on downstream sites, making the developer address those when they're developing upstream is another one. Again, these are not 3 things we think are going to be overly popular with developers. And so we wanted to make sure that you're prepared for that at some point somebody's going to stand at this lectern and say, tell them to back off. But I think it's important that we look at it at this juncture, so we're not here 10 years from now going, why didn't we do something more? So, and that's kind of what we're looking for direction on. Unless we hear strong objections, don't look into that. We'll continue to explore that, have those conversations with engineers so they can understand what we're getting ready to do. And it doesn't really take an action by you, because it's already in our drainage criteria manual today. We can just start enforcing it if you're good with that.
Okay, thank you, Don. So directors, I guess I would ask then if you all would like for them to pursue what they have presented tonight for you, for the future.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yes. I think being proactive is fantastic. I am totally for all of this. And I also just want to say I appreciate, because I've been a lot of those 19 to 20, I appreciate all the effort being put into that and all the field trips we've made and the ones we have planned for the next few weeks. So thank you. That means a lot. And it means a lot to the citizens whose property's being destroyed. So thank you.
Welcome. Glad to do
Yes.
it.
I do think we need to go forward with this, because I do think there are citizens out there that do have water issues, and we need to take care of those. So I appreciate this program. I appreciate your presentation, and I want to move forward in looking at more what we can do.
Thank you.
And I think that I'm kind of seeing a nod of heads here that everyone is in agreement with that. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Reed.
Yes, I want to say I'm in agreement with that, but I'd also like to see y'all do your very best to be a builder-friendly community. And I know that's kind of a paradox, but give you a tall order there.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Ken.
this is very well put together, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay. So if you ever go into teaching, you'll do fine. And I agree. From out in the audience, I've heard so many times the conversation of developers. They come in, they build, they leave, and we're stuck with the problem. And so I see what you're advocating as an answer to that. And yes, they're not going to like it if we say we have to build bigger pond areas. But if that will take care of a problem, that's where we need to be, and that's where we need to stand. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Lisa.
So I agree, we should pursue doing that. But I also want to make sure we focus on the issues that we do have, because there's a lot of people sitting in this audience that I have sat with for 4 years now, and they're still here today because their issue is not solved. And so when it's your home that's flooded, it's a big deal.
Right.
And it should be a big deal to our community. We're supposed to be here for everybody. And so like I said, there's people in this audience that have had flooded homes, and I want to make sure that we focus on those as well.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Don,
Thank
Steve,
you all.
thank you all very much. And because we are at 6:35, I am going to adjourn this workshop, and we will reconvene at 6:40. We are adjourned. Call to order this regular Board of Directors meeting for April 18th, 2023. Roll call.
Blair,
Here.
Smiley,
Here,
Wiles,
Here.
Hunt, Rissler,
Here.
Allen, Carroll.
Here.
At this time, if you all will please stand with me as Director Carroll leads us in a word of prayer, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, tonight we give thanks for today. We give thanks for your leading, that we may follow your righteousness, that we can do and be the people you've called us to be in this community of Siloam Springs, and that we as a board can make wise decisions that help to benefit our community and to lead us into the future. And we look forward to looking to you in all things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, I would like to ask that anyone that has an electronic device, please silence that or turn that off so we don't have an interruption during our speakers. And I thank you for that. Next is our public input time. And at this time, anyone who would like to speak to the board about any item that is not on our regular agenda may come to the podium. You will have 3 minutes. I need you to please state your name and your home address. Thank you.
Robert Johnston, 605 North Buffalo Gap Drive in Siloam Springs. And a short story, just want to offer all of us for encouragement. Suppose in 20,000 years, an archaeologist from another society were poking around the ruins of our city. If he could dig up just 1 penny, he would know this about us. The coin is made of a blend of metals. That would tell him that we were miners and knew the science of metallurgy. By the shape of the coin, a perfect circle, he would know that we understood geometry. The date on the face of the coin would show him we understood arithmetic and that we had a calendar. The portrait of Abraham Lincoln would mark us as artists who had an advanced culture. The words United States would let him know that we were a federated group of local communities bound together by a strong central government. The phrase e pluribus unum would tell him that we were scholars who knew foreign languages. The word liberty on the face of the penny would let him know that our country sought to guarantee freedom for every person, everywhere. Finally, the phrase, in God we trust, would tell him that we had a moral law. It would let him know that we had grown strong and mighty under God's great hand. And then, considering the penny, he might wonder, why and how did they ever go astray? Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might. great God, our King.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Hey, Arthur Holbert, 20705 Highway 16. Realized that today there was another Arthur that was in town. Arthur Fonzarelli was in Siloam Springs today. Henry Winkler, that's right, was at Jiffy Trip. He goes by the other Arthur. But anyway, he was at Jiffy Trip today. Tonight I do want to share a couple comments and like to state that I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization I'm associated with or on behalf of anyone else other than myself. And Arthur Fonzarelli is an example of you never know who's in town or who's watching us. But I'm sure he had a great experience here. About 2.5 hours ago, I was at our kayak park and just kind of enjoying just the natural beauty of it all. And just thankful how the Walton Foundation, helped pay for that and make it all available, along with giving us the 35 adjoining acres. And I just want to say that I am supportive of the city contract y'all did last time with the IWRP, and understand the need to charge something for the kayak park, like many state parks. But in my opinion, $10 is a lot for each car, and I'm concerned that only about 100 cars being allowed at a time in the area. There's going to be a lot of disappointed people. Last year, 57,000 visits were. I'm concerned to be thousands of people, many families who come that will leave disappointed because they'll not be able to access the kayak park either due to cost or limited space. I'm also concerned that many of the people who come to Siloam Springs to access the river at the kayak park can't get in and will find other ways to get in by trespassing on other people's property. As a landowner on the Illinois River, that could possibly impact me. So I guess my solution would be, while I know the decision and the contract was finalized at the last city board meeting, I'd like the city to consider using some of the other 35 acres that was donated for free to the Walton Foundation that adjoins the kayak park for parking on the grass, say for maybe $3 and $5 instead of $10, and you park at your own risk. If you get stuck, call a tow truck, much like what they do at Daytona Beach, where I've personally been stuck and have been pulled out. So lastly, on a completely separate topic, like I said, I'm just sharing my opinions. Completely separate topic, I would like to say that I am very supportive of our city board, and I'm personally not supportive at all of any petitions to recall any city board members in this room. And I'm also personally very thankful for each of you, your sacrifice, your time, energy, money, and resources, and service as our city board of directors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Blake Jones, 1105 East Courage Street, Siloam Springs. After speaking to you last, Jay Williams called my house, calling me a liar and being completely rude to me with no purpose of business. After he said he and the chief reviewed the content, he has refused to explain to our administrator what documents he reviewed. In the prior meeting, you were told I could have access to the video by Jay directly after...
Blake, could you speak into the mic, please? Thank you.
Directly after, in this email, the Siloam police contacted the prosecutor trying to have me charged for harassing them for asking for this evidence. They contacted my attorney asking him to help them to get me to stop requesting the evidence. This is wrong on every level and a violation of the law. Also, Jay Williams did not respond to my FOIA request for emails concerning myself between him and other public officials for almost a week. He's allowed 72 hours. He has violated the law again. Lastly, these individuals have tried to change their narrative and say the officers turned their radio off. Here in this same email, it states again for redactions, I cannot have the video. There are no redactions to the officer videos whatsoever. Just removal of evidence, which I have shown to your administrator and to your human resource official. Now I'm going to read the email that they sent it to me by my attorney. This is from Brianna F. Barnica on Monday, April 10, 2023, to Seth Segovia, who is the main prosecutor for Benton County. He CC'd my attorney, and the subject is Blake Jones. Seth, I got contacted again by Siloam PD with questions on the FOIA request Blake Jones keeps sending. I've CC'd Brian Vernetti in the hopes he is still the attorney of record and can advise Mr. Jones that the Siloam Springs Police Department is not permitted under the law to release unredacted videos. Again, there's nothing to do with an officer turning their radio off, so we can leave that alone now. He is apparently asking for an unredacted video, and they cannot provide it due to the parts being cut out, being excluded under the law. Brian, this guy is at the PD's office every day. Can you say/do anything that will help him to back off, even if it's just for a few days? They really need to be focusing on other things, and they are starting to feel harassed. I would appreciate it. The problem is I'm submitting FOIA requests with the Freedom of Information Act, if people don't know, and I'm entitled to that by law. There is no amount that I can do, whatever. And if I hadn't filed it in the first place, we wouldn't know that your officers didn't redact the video. They just removed evidence. So that's why that law is in effect. That's also why I made them and you guys purchase the software to buy that, so that we can obtain that information. So asking the prosecutor to charge me for asking for that evidence, I suggest that you get yourselves in line. And if you don't do anything, may God have mercy on all of you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else?
Wayne Thomas, 1579 Andrew Court. On behalf of the seniors of our community, I just want to stand here tonight and say thank you to each one of you directors in the time that you serve in our community. Often our seniors can't come to these meetings, and they've been bugging me to make sure I come. Forgive me for not being here, but I need to be here more often. I want to just kind of have the opportunity tonight to share about a Everest campaign that our organization, because I am a nonprofit founder and director of Kind at Heart, and we are, for the next 2 weeks, it's 10 days, we will be hosting a Everest Challenge, and our community is coming together to celebrate the calling to help seniors accomplish the challenges in their life. And I love the fact that I have the opportunity to meet with many seniors in our community who often are isolated, disconnected, and don't have support like they should have. My heart and desire is to see our community come together, support them across all areas, and make our seniors a part of Siloam Springs in a bigger way. Not to say we aren't doing something already, but we can never, ever stop trying to do our best to make sure our seniors are valued and that they can keep their dignity and their quality of life in Siloam Springs. And so our Everest Challenge, it's going on for 10 days. We'll have community members climbing the steps at JBU. 492 trips up there and down equals the elevation of Mount Everest, and our whole community is coming together to do that. And I want, if anybody wants to know anything about the Everest Challenge or participate in that, it's a fundraiser too for Kind at Heart. You can go to kindatheart.org and go to our Facebook and get to links, or you can go to everest.cosvox.com. Thank you, city directors, and I'm honored to be here tonight for our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hello, Ben Bergstrom, 708 East Helena Street. Let me start by saying I have a sincere appreciation for the work of the board. It is challenging and careful work to manage a city, and I'm grateful to you and all city staff. Now, it's been nearly 2 months since Philip Patterson was fired without cause and with great taxpayer expense. Since then, citizens have taken every opportunity to address this board and ask why 4 directors made that decision. Still, no clear answer has been given, and no constructive vision for the future has been cast. The response, "we can't tell you why," isn't good enough. I'm here tonight still talking about this because this board is still accountable to its citizens and for that decision. Not because anything can be undone, but because of what lies ahead, and that every time this board of directors meets, it asks the people to trust them, and now that is more difficult to do. Very recently, while Philip Patterson was still in his position, a citizen satisfaction survey was conducted. Citizens were highly satisfied with the city and the services that it offers. A majority also felt like the city was on a good track for managing its future growth. Patterson was skilled at and committed to long-term planning, encouraging independence and autonomy amongst departments to do the same. This city deserves leadership that looks forward. We need leadership that creates and sustains a positive vision for the future. Just look at that community survey and look at the recently adopted comprehensive plan and its community responses. The people of this town have their minds set on a good future. The 4 directors that voted to fire Mr. Patterson undercut that future, and no new, different, or better vision is anywhere to be seen. Currently, this board majority seems to know how to tear things down for no good reason, but Siloam deserves leadership that works to build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Megan Feierabend, 414 South Wright Street. There seem to be a lot of rumors swirling regarding the use of executive session and what can and can't be shared. Even in last meeting's director's comments, Director Blair Finn presented an idea, without any sources cited, that there could be astronomical fines and even prison time if they were to share the reasons why our city administrator was terminated. Director Hunt presented different information, provided directly from the AML Legal Counsel, stating that there are no such legal repercussions, and that while it is best practiced to keep personnel matters confidential, it is ultimately up to the board's discretion. Director Smiley also mentioned that she was told that as well. So how is the public supposed to know what is true? It would seem that the AML Legal Counsel would carry the most weight, as it's a reputable source that is knowledgeable in the details of the Freedom of Information Act and how it relates to a city board of directors. Also, according to multiple cases heard before the Arkansas Supreme Court, along with opinions on those cases, the precedent set tips in favor of openness to the public, favoring public disclosure. In an opinion delivered in 1987 by Dan Kennett, Chief Deputy Attorney General of Arkansas, he states, quote, "In Layman v. McCord, the Arkansas Supreme Court outlines the doctrine that the Freedom of Information Act is to be interpreted most favorably to the public. The court continues to follow Layman. Therefore, when a conflict arises involving the Freedom of Information Act, it is clear that the Supreme Court believes the balance is to tip in favor of openness. I believe the legislative intent of this provision of the Freedom of Information Act to be clear. The executive session was created to protect the privacy interests of an individual, not accommodate a governing body. The Arkansas Supreme Court recognizes this in Commercial Printing Co. First Rush. The legislature has provided for both the public's right to know and protection of individuals' rights from unwarranted adverse publicity and ensuing damage to individuals' reputations." End quote. Because Philip Patterson is receiving the full severance and benefits, we know that he did nothing illegal, there was no gross incompetence or other morally questionable behavior, as outlined in his letter to the editor of the Herald Leader and the terms of his employment agreement. It is absolutely within this board's rights to choose to discuss why our city administrator was fired seemingly out of the blue. So we, the public, are asking for answers. What was so egregious that required an immediate termination without the opportunity to correct any potential mistakes made? Or are we, the taxpayers, footing the bill to settle petty personal disagreements? May the truth be spoken.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Kelsey Howard, 312 South College Street. I also want to echo what's been said already, just appreciation for the board and the board's complex and difficult job that you have to do every day, really, because you, as a public servant, you kind of give up your anonymity going out in public and you serve the people. So thank you for when you research and listen and serve the public. I was really impressed by a recent opinion by a local and well-respected doctor in the opinions section of the Herald Leader recently. And I just want to quote a little bit of that to you. He was talking about Mr. Patterson being terminated without cause. And here I'll begin quoting his letter. He assumed he was fired because the voting majority of the city board were looking for a different looking for different leadership. This raises several questions. While Mr. Patterson was fired without cause, he was not fired without a reason. What was the reason the voting majority fired him? Please inform us. If the voting majority of the city board wants to take the city in a different direction, what is that direction that they want to take us? Please tell us of your intentions. If good character, class, and competence is not what they are looking for in a city administrator, what are they looking for? I'm especially interested in that section when this person said, what is the direction that they want to take us? So I've heard from several of you saying that you cannot discuss personnel issues. In that case, if that is your stance, I'm just curious to know, what is the direction that you want to take the city? I would so love in your director's reports, either at this meeting or in a future meeting, if you would take the time to tell us what is the direction that you want to take the city that Administrator Patterson was not taking us to. I think a lot of people would really appreciate that, since that and really is kind of outside of any question about executive committee. This is just about your vision for the city. I'd love to hear it. I'd also just want to end my time just mentioning how exciting it's been and how humbling it's been, and how I appreciate that this movement of Unite Siloam, or whatever you want to call it, that there's accountability for our leaders, that it is such a broad scope of political opinion. We're seeing people of all ages, people of all opinions on the political spectrum, and we've seen this on the Unite Siloam Facebook page. I've loved all of the quotes from community members talking about how much they love our town, and just saying that the community supports the recall. It's not just one small subsect of the community. It is a large group of people, and I have loved being part of that, being united under a hope for a healthier Siloam Springs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. Is there anyone else? If not, I would ask if there is anyone in the audience that would like to address any item that is on our consent agenda tonight. There being none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Item A, regular meeting minutes for April 4, 2023. Item B, Resolution 22-23, Final Plat Development Permit, Grandview Estates Subdivision, Phase 2, 3901 East Kenwood Street. Directors, is there anything that you would like pulled from this consent agenda for further discussion? If not, do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Roll call.
Smiley.
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Rissler.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next is contracts and approvals. Item C, bond for acting city administrator. And I believe, Christina, you have some information for the board.
I do. At the last meeting, the board requested quotes from AML for $300,000, $1 million, and the amount of the bond for the previous city administrator. Per the city administrator's contract, the city was supposed to purchase the bond, and it took quite some time for me to confirm that the HR manager at the time, again, back in 2015, that they did not purchase a bond, nor did they forward that contract on for somebody else to purchase the bond. So the only bond in place was that provided by the state. Okay. So, and to correct a statement that was made at the last meeting, AML does not provide fidelity bonds. So I have requested quotes from Moss, and I apologize, but there are no quotes available today. A background check will be required for them to provide quotes, and that takes time. So it's important for the board to understand my situation is unique in that I'm the city treasurer, which means I have access to funds. And this will likely result in a costlier bond. However, I would like to clarify my role as treasurer and that of city administrator so you can properly assess this issue when you're dealing with the city administrator, whoever that person shall be, because a bond will be required. So in the finance department, I do not have access to edit or make entries to the general ledger at all because I'm the treasurer. And although I sign checks, I don't have access to the physical checks. They are locked in rooms that I don't have access to, which means those checks have to be prepared and presented to me for signature. I can wire and transfer funds, but everything that I wire or transfer, the bank confirmations for those transactions are sent directly to the person who makes the journal entries. So any misconduct on my part would be immediately made known to staff. The city administrator's position, on the other hand, has neither access to the general ledger nor any signing authority for the city. So the only signers at the city are the mayor, the city clerk, and myself. I should have quotes available at the next board meeting if the board still would like to consider an additional bond.
So I suppose then my question is going to be to the board. Since we did not have a bond on our previous administrator, do you all want to pursue getting quotes and looking at a bond for Christina during her time as interim administrator? Or do we want to leave it as it is? Because you are covered by the city as the employee.
Correct.
Right. So there is that already in place for her in that capacity. So the direction needs to be from you all. Do we want to just leave this where it is and continue on as we are now? Or do you want to table this till the next meeting and let her bring, or maybe 2 meetings. It depends on how long it takes for the background check and those sort of things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your call. That is your decision. So what is your pleasure?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Reed.
I would like to ask Christina what you are most comfortable with. I don't want to set you out to be high and dry either.
I'm comfortable with the existing bond. I don't have an issue with, I set up internal controls so that I don't have access.
Thank you. And Jay, do you have an opinion on this?
Well, just being a risk-averse attorney, it's always better to have more backup, a bond if you can get it. But you have to weigh the cost. You have to weigh the delay that's involved. We're talking 2 weeks to possibly a month to get it for a temporary position. So under those circumstances, it's tough to say that it would really be worth it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion then that we continue as we are now with no bond for administrator side and continue as with Christina being covered by the city in her position as the treasurer?
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
will make that motion.
Second.
Do I have a motion and a second? So everyone understands what we're voting on, right? That we're leaving it as it is. We're not continuing on getting background check, getting quotes. Okay, roll call.
Wiles.
Yes.
Bristler.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Christina. Next is D, Public Works Department, Water Division, North Water Tower Painting, Dixie Painting and Sandblasting for $482,740. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. Steve Gorzek, Public Works Director. At the December 6th, 2022 board meeting, all of you had approved Horner and Schifrin to be the project manager on this water tower painting project. So first, I want to thank you for that. That took us to this step, which is getting a contractor that that we're going to recommend to paint this tower. But I thought in the interim, I'll give you a brief synopsis of what has happened since we hired the project manager. For starters, a set of specifications was put together, and the engineer stamped that, sent it to the Arkansas Department of Health, and they are currently reviewing. We had advertised for bid, and we went through the normal channels, which is the city website, the Herald Leader, the Democrat Gazette, and there's actually a state website too for bids. The bid opening, or the pre-bid meeting, was held on March 15th, and I'm happy to say that there were seven contractors who actually bid on this job. So that was nice to see. And I'm going to stop there for a second and mention that in that pre-bid meeting, the specifications said that the time allowed to paint the tower was until June 15th. And the contractors that were in the pre-bid meeting had unanimously said that with the amount of work that we're asking them to do, that there's no way they're going to get it done in 2 months, because if the board approves this evening, then we would issue a notice of award tomorrow. So it'd be less than 2 months to get the job done. So after the pre-bid, myself, the project manager, the inspector that's going to be on this, would be on this project, the water plant superintendent, and the water services superintendent, we all got together and talked about this, and we decided that, we want this done right and not done fast. So as a result, we issued an addendum to the contractor saying that, we still want you to paint this tower, but we're going to ask for you not to start until after Labor Day. So if you approve this project this evening, then we won't begin the project until after Labor Day for a couple of reasons. One, June 15th, we're getting in the middle of summer, or getting close to it. Temperatures are going to start warming up. We're going to need that tower in order to keep up with the demands, because the demands are going to start spiking. The second is it would be less than 60 days to get the project completed. So starting after Labor Day, even though it's still going to be warm, we can afford to start taking the tower out of service, because colder weather is coming and demands are going to start dropping. On top of that, it allows the contractor 150 days to get this project done. And I believe that, like I was saying, if they get it done right instead of getting it done fast, then I think we're going to be happier with the end product. Now, the project's going to involve putting a curtain over the tower. So they're going to drape a big tarp over this thing. They'll have some supports set up so that the tarp won't be touching the tower, but it'll be hanging over it. That way the sandblaster can get in there and blast this down to bare metal. It was decided, rather than putting an overcoat on the tower like was originally thought, the fact that paint's been on there for 33 years, it would probably be a good idea to blast it to bare metal and start over again. I mean, if that paint job lasted 33 years, then we'll get at least 25 out of this next paint job if we go back to bare metal. So, 33 years from now, I'll be looking down and saying, hey, they're painting the tower again. Let's see, where am I? Oh, the bid opening was on March 28th, and there was, in your staff memo, you'll see that there was a wide range of prices. We had the low bid being Dixie Painting and Sandblasting at $482,740. The next lowest was pretty close, only $11,000 more at $493,500. But then it went all the way up to the high price was $861,250. So I think we did check references with Dixie Painting, and we had 4 different people that were contacted, and all of them were pleased with the work they did. Given the fact that this is going to involve sandblasting, putting a curtain over the tower, and then 3 coats of paint, which would be the primer, intermediate coat, and the finish coat, not to mention the logo that will match the other 2 towers, I think we're getting a pretty good deal, personally. And I say that because in 2022, there was $400,000 budgeted for this project, and I was afraid that it wasn't going to come close. If we had taken out the curtaining, we probably would have been right at that. But we've got a neighbor that's not too far from the water tower, and I don't want to take a chance on, since he does auto detailing, of dust getting all over these cars that he's going to be working on. So that's why we want to do the curtain. So what we would do is, with the $400,000 that was budgeted last year, $33,400 came out. Yeah, $33,400 came out to pay the consulting firm, and then the rest of the money went back into reserve. So we will take the money out of reserve plus an additional $116,000 to cover this, the cost of the painting, and then later in the year, toward the end of when we're into budgets and we get close to the end of this year's budget, then Christina will come to the board with budget amendments besides this one. And so with that, I ask that the board approve Dixie Painting and Sandblasting for painting the North Water Tower at a cost of $482,740, and I stand available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, comments or questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
Steve, what type of insurance does this painting company have?
I don't have that here in front of me, but it is our standard insurance policy. Yeah, it's like $1 million for liability.
Anyone else? Is there anyone in the audience that has comments or questions for this proposal? If not, directors, do I have a motion to approve the Public Works Department request for the Dixie Painting and Sandblasting in the amount of $482,740 for the North Water Tower painting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Rissler,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Steve. Next is our regularly scheduled items. Ordinances. Item E, Ordinance 23-07, third reading, annexation of 18.47 acres at 2270 Don Hill Road. Megan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the third reading for an annexation request located at 2270 Don Hill Road. As a reminder, the request is to annex approximately 18.47 acres into the city as R2 residential medium. Staff is still recommending approval of this request with no needed conditions, and staff is available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors? If there are no questions from you, then I would ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address this proposal. If not, do I have a motion to place Ordinance 23-07 on its third reading, suspending the rules, reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Rissler.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Christina?
Ordinance number 23-07, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory described as 2270 Don Hill Road to the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and assigning same to a ward.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt Ordinance 23-07?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt. Roll call.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Ordinance 23-07 is adopted. Next, Ordinance 23-08, First reading, amending Chapter 38 of the City Municipal Code, sale and use of fireworks in the city limits. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Jeremy Kreiner, Fire Chief. For some background information, after Independence Day of last year, there were some concerns and issues brought up at the board meeting as it relates to our current code as it pertaining to fireworks. So in September, we brought back some information to the board and asked for some recommendations moving forward. And it was determined that while everybody enjoys fireworks, it may be best to restrict those just slightly based on what our current ordinance was at the time. So what the proposal is before you today, the ordinance, is to reduce the number of days that fireworks are allowed to be used by the public. So currently it's July 1 through July the 4th. So we would eliminate July the 1st and just have it July the 2nd through the 4th. And then also would limit the number of hours that they are allowed to be shot off each day. On the 4th, it was up until midnight, and so that would pull all of those days back to 10 p.m. And so we felt like that was a good compromise there. And so that was all based on board recommendations, and with that, staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. Directors?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Lisa.
Does that include, somebody's asked me about if you can't set off a firework, do they sell them in city limits? Do they sell those fireworks that we cannot set off inside city limits? Do they sell them inside city limits?
Great question. And the easy answer is no. So our city ordinance does not allow bottle rockets and items on a stick. And so when a vendor comes in and wants to set up a fireworks stand to sell during the dates that they're allowed, we go out and have to inspect each one of those fireworks stands after they have them all set up, make sure they meet all of those. We also check the content of what they're selling and ensure that they don't. The unfortunate thing is they're also allowed to set up just right outside our city limits, whereas they don't fall into our city code. So there are some that probably get infiltrated into the city, but they should not be sold inside our city limits.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Betsy?
Mayor. I guess, do you, with your expertise and complaints and everything, do you have any personal input as fire chief?
I'm very comfortable, and I appreciate the question. I'm very comfortable with the way that the ordinance is written, both pre-today and or the current ordinance that's in effect and the current revision. I think both of those mitigate the risk associated with fireworks and allow some freedom to have folks some guidelines to use them. And so, we'll never completely mitigate the risk associated with fireworks, but at least this provides a framework where they can use them within the regulations. So yes, I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 23-0? Yes, sir. Please come and yes, sir, please state your name and address.
Ben Bergstrom, 708 East Helena. With respect, we have changed. We used to not be able to shoot fireworks off in city limits. Now this ordinance that's being proposed to change allowed people to do it. I just wonder if we're shrinking it, can we ask ourselves, is it better now that you can shoot fireworks off in city limits than it was before when people couldn't? My answer would be no. Living with a dog and small child, when those fireworks go off right in front of your house, sends your dog. I'm not the only dog owner or pet owner that has, these negative associations. And frankly, I haven't heard anybody with a positive story after this ordinance was changed and people were allowed to shoot fireworks off in city limits. Fireworks are fun. Everyone still shoots off bottle rockets and things that are not strictly allowed in this ordinance. And we don't have enough enforcement, I believe, to personnel to really cramp down on it. So I just think that this is maybe a good change, but doesn't seem like quite enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, directors, comments or questions from you?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Betsy.
I have one of those dogs too, and I have to give him a tranquilizer. It's awful. And I also feel sorry for veterans. with all the fireworks going on, but then I also know there are other people who want to be able to shoot off the fireworks in city limits. I don't know that there's a great solution, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
I too have a pet that does not appreciate fireworks. But I also know that there are some citizens that do like to have the opportunity to shoot off fireworks. So I think this is a compromise for both sides, and I would be in favor of this. I am one of them that came back and said I have people that are asking me not to shoot them off so early and not so late at night. So I appreciate that the staff has come back and brought this forward to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Lisa.
When we first started talking about this, I reached out to the citizens, and most of them said, we don't want fireworks at all, but we'd rather you at least compromise. And I feel like Director Smiley said, this is a compromise. Some people have to work the next day. The 4th doesn't always fall on a weekend, and so we need to be considerate of the people that still have to get up the next day and go to work. And I don't know what the solution is to the bottle rockets. I know that's an issue. This was introduced, and it has helped the police department on calls, on the number of calls that they receive. And so it has served its purpose in some ways, but it's created problems in others. And like I said, I don't know what the solution is about the fireworks that they're not supposed to set off. I know some fireworks have been set toward their neighbor's house and ended up in their pool and on their roof, and it becomes a fire hazard. If anybody has a solution, we're willing to hear it, because this is a controversial issue that we do want to compromise, and we want everybody at peace in our community.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to approve Ordinance 23-08, or I'm sorry, to place it on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
Moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley.
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Chrysler.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Christina?
Ordinance 23-08, an ordinance amending Chapter 38, Article 4 of the Siloam Springs City Code with respect to regulation of the sale and use of fireworks in city limits.
Thank you. Then thank you, Jeremy. Next is item G, Ordinance 23-09, first reading, vacation of utility easements, 3299 Highway 412 East. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. So before you this evening is a request to partially abandon two 15-foot wide sections of two 20-foot wide utility easements. This is occurring at 2399 Highway 412 East, that is the vacant lot that's between Walmart and Lowe's. On the left side of the slide is the overall survey provided by the applicant. The abandonment for your consideration are shown in the gray hatching color. I've blown up the image on the right side of the slide so you can see better what's kind of happening there. The applicant has left a 5-foot wide gap of easement to be retained at the property line. This area is kept so that the underground gas and electric lines, which are on the Lowe's side, are accessible if equipment is needed on the west side of that property line. And I will circle real quickly just what I'm talking about. It's these lines right here, blown up here. So both Black Hills Energy and Silent Springs Electric have signed off on the proposed closures as well as the other city departments. And here you see an aerial image of the site with the two 15-foot sections of easement highlighted in the red. These easements are no longer needed in reference to a related development project on the same property, which I will present next on tonight's agenda. The easements do not abut neighboring properties, so the landowners are not party to the proposed closures. And here is just, I've circled the entire site there, but that's the property looking to the north. Our staff is in support of the closures, and we are recommending approval with no needed conditions, and we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Directors? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 23-09? Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name and address for us.
Mayor, Board of Directors, my name is Steve Harriman. I'm an officer with the Burke Collins Company. Our address is 500 Grapevine Highway, Suite 224 in Hurst, Texas, 76054. I would like to request that the board members vote favorably for our project. There's a lot of hard work that's gone into this. We've worked with city staff over the time, and we feel like we have a good project that is ready to go. We have 3 fine tenants, and I think they fit the need of what the citizens were looking for, primarily apparel. I think it's important to give you an idea of how this process worked, how it all came together, truthfully. We had been successful developing these type stores in Texas and Oklahoma. In that Ross, TJ Maxx, Hobby Lobby, those kind of tenants were ones that we had had a lot of work with and had successfully performed. They asked us to come, selectively, Ross asked us to come into Northwest Arkansas. They felt a need that they did not have enough stores or enough of a presence in Northwest Arkansas. So as a result of that, we had our first meeting, which is very common, and we, as a developer, meet with the representatives of the tenants. In this case, a gentleman who represents Ross he offices in Rogers. During that meeting, it's very customary that we bring a list of cities that we feel like would qualify, and they do the same. In that, we combine our list, and as it turns out, we came up with about 7, and probably 5 of them were identical from each of us. Siloam Springs was recommended by both of us. When you go through this process, and we had built several stores recently from the ground up, which has become very, very difficult because of cost and the limited amount of rent that these folks honestly pay. The first thing you do is look at the existing product that's on the ground in each city. And if there are improvements there that fit the needs, parking, visibility, traffic counts, just the clearance from the floor to the bottom of the joist, these kind of things come into play. Well, we asked them if there was any property in Siloam that would fit their need, and they said, no, we've already determined that there is no product there that fits our need. So they then said, well, what do you think? And you said, well, what do you guys think? And you said, well, we've checked you guys out. Y'all are very good at what you do. You've been a site selector in the past, Steve. Where would you say? And I said, I would go where the growth of the city is, and near Walmart Supercenter. And they said, exactly, that's where we want to be. So that's how this all came about, just so that you know what we go through in order to prove these sites. And we're one of the few developers that's left that's building from the ground up. And I will tell you, as a result of those 7 selections, Siloam Springs is the first stores we are coming out of the ground with. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. Is there anyone else? If not, back to you, directors. Comments or questions at this point?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
I just want you to know that I am excited that you are looking at Siloam Springs. And I know that our citizens are excited about the stores. I've heard a lot of people talking about them, and it makes me feel good that you are thinking about Siloam and selecting that site. So I appreciate that. These are my favorite stores, some of them. So I'm looking forward to hopefully shopping there. So let's see where we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to place Ordinance 23-09 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Wiles,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Christina?
Ordinance 23-09, an ordinance vacating and abandoning portions of 2 utility easement right-of-ways at 3299 Highway 412 East.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to our resolutions, which is item H, Resolution 23-23, Significant Development Permit, 3299 Highway 412 East, the Siloam Crossings Shopping Center. This is fast-tracked from the April 11th, 2023 Planning Commission. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Mayor and members of the board. You guys probably know what this project is at this point. But yes, this is the development project for retail structure that, as the address has said, 3299 Highway 412 East. This development proposal is for a 50,088 square foot commercial retail stores between Walmart and Lowe's. And as you probably know, this is the same area I covered in the easement vacation from the previous item that we just reviewed. So here's the overall site plan showing both the parking area and building. Lowe's is to the bottom and Walmart on the top. I had to flip it, so we have north going that direction, just so you can see it all fit on the slide. There is an existing side access easement to allow access to the rear stores. And this is not actually a cul-de-sac, but just shows the turnaround area for trucks and delivery vehicles and such to be able to get in and out of the back of the store using that side access easement. That's on the Lowe's side of the project. It would be should be noted that the Board of Adjustment did meet last Tuesday, and they approved a related setback encroachment variance on the east side. This was a 3.72 foot encroachment into that east side setback. The buildings sidings do clear the 5-foot utility easements that's left as retainer per the Ordinance 2309. Here you see the proposed parking area between the drives that connect Walmarts and Lowe's. So the southern part of the property. The applicant is adding landscape islands to the parking area, and it will be landscaped with trees. And here you see a rendering of the proposed structures and their tenants, these being Ross, TJ Maxx, and Five Below. And here is a site looking to the north. The reserve apartments are still planned to be going to the north of this area, right up there, but they have not yet started construction. Staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval with some conditions, and I will cover those now. The applicant is required to receive a setback variance. This has been fulfilled and is no longer needed. The applicant to vacate the utility easements prior to the building certificate of occupancy. That the applicant file a drainage and utility easement via separate instrument prior to certificate of occupancy. And that the city's sanitation division approve the final location and sizing of the dumpster corrals, also prior to the building permit issuance. And with that, we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Directors, comments or questions? There being none, I would ask if there is anyone in the audience that have any comments or questions about Resolution 23-23. There being none, I will come back and ask for a motion to approve Resolution 23-23 for the significant development permit for 3299 Highway 412 East, subject to the recommended conditions of approval, except for item 1. Is that right? Okay.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Yes. Thank you, Ken. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Carroll.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Resolution 23-23 is passed. So with that, we will now move on to our staff reports. We have the first quarter nonprofit reports from the History Museum, Main Street Siloam Springs, and Chamber of Commerce. Also our January and February financials. Christina?
Yes, included in the agenda packet were the first quarter nonprofit reports, as well as the January and February financial statements. So if you have any questions regarding the financial statements, please contact me or Kim Williams.
Thank you. And now we will move to our administrator's report.
So there were no expenditures in excess of $30,000, but there were two that per Resolution 43-22. The first is $62,000 for one 2,500 kVA pad mount transformer for inventory. The second was $95,312 for two 2,000 kVA pad mount transformers for inventory. I would like to just remind everybody that the Parks and Rec Division will be holding a tree giveaway sponsored by the Walton Family Foundation on May 6th in the parking lot across from the library from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., or excuse me, 10 a.m. The all-city employee meeting is scheduled for May 5th at Fire Station 1, and the board is invited. Spring cleanup was last week, and tonnage collected was 199.75 tons compared to 170 tons last spring. And 26 employees spent about 367 man-hours picking up refuse around the city. I attended the ACMA conference in Little Rock with Megan Whitworth and Don Clark. And during that conference, AML discussed several laws that recently passed which will impact the city. I think some of these have been discussed before, but I just want to bring these back to your attention. The first is going to be House Bill 1302, which requires the city to provide a minimum of 12 mental health visits per calendar year for public safety employees. So we will probably be amending our handbook shortly. And House Bill 1318, this is beneficial for purchasing because it will allow us to look at life cycle and term costs to be considered over or in lieu of the lowest price, as long as we include that as part of the bid. House Bill 1469 removes the primary election process going forward. So there will be no more primary elections. There will only be general elections and then runoffs. And finally, House Bill 1515, which allows cities to adopt rate increases for water as indicated by a required rate study, which may include the option to implement over time. So the first rate study required for Siloam Springs will be by July 1st, 2026. It also requires all entities, when I say all entities, meaning water retailers, to deposit a minimum of 5% of gross revenue into a refurbishment and replacement account, but we can use those funds at any time. There's not any special restrictions. It's kind of like depreciation funds. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Christina. So with that, we will move into our director's reports. And I do want to go back to the employee meeting that we are having May 5th. If there are any of the directors that would like to volunteer to help during that meeting to serve food, then just please let Misty or Christina know so that they can plan for that and know that you're going to be doing that. Okay? So with that, we'll move to the directors. And Carol, we will start with you tonight. And Ken, we will end with you.
First of all, I think I've already indicated to Misty that I do want to help at the employee appreciation lunch. I want to thank all of the employees of the city for their support and their dedication. You are what makes this city what it is, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you very much. I know that we all know that the Dogwood Festival is coming up, and I want to thank the Chamber for putting this together. I hope everybody will enjoy and participate. I want to thank the city for all the effort in the spring cleanup and sprucing up our city for the Dogwood Festival. It's looking really good. And I know it looks like we picked up a lot of curbside, whatever. And that is really all I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to say thank you to all those that come out on a regular basis here recently. Appreciate the support that you're showing for the city of Siloam Springs, and that we can take that next step, and it can be a positive one, and we can look forward to what the future has for us. It's exciting to see nature spring forth again, but we can also do that in our own hearts as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Lisa?
Christina, thank you for bringing those bills to us. If you ever watch the Senate and the House, and those bills go through fast. And if they go to a committee and then having to stay up with the committee and then watch those committees and seeing them go back to the floor, it's an amazing thing, and it's interesting and see how much it affects our city. I do have a question on HB 1515. Does our recent rate study, will that be, or do we have to have another one before 2026?
I believe that because it's going to be more than 5 years old, we'll have to have another one by 2026.
So ours was it'll be right at the 5-year mark. So we'll have to go ahead and do one. Okay, I was thinking 4 years because it's 2023, but. The cleanup week was last week. Thank you to those employees that work all those hours. A lot of employees, they put a lot of effort into doing that. A lot of citizens, we've talked about taking it down to one time a year, and I've had a lot of citizens say, no, we see the benefit in having it twice a year. And I thank you for having that twice a year. I appreciate that we're able to offer that to the citizens of our community. A member of the audience requested that we possibly communicate through the utility bills regarding ordinances of like mowing your lawn, and people get together more in the summer, in the spring, summer, and fall, and they tend to, when they get together, park on sidewalks. Just remind them of some ordinances that are violated a lot during this time, maybe on the city's website and our Facebook page and the city utilities. And also, can we sometime, maybe next meeting or something, get an update on the Sager Creek project?
I'll make a note of it.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Betsy?
I want to thank everybody's gone for all the work on drainage. Well, you're not gone. Sorry, Kevin. Whoops. The engineer's still here, the most important one. Thank you, and I'm just really excited to be working on infrastructure, getting these things taken care of, and I know if we contract some stuff out, that will free up streets to be working on that. So I love that we're focusing on these things and moving forward with them. Wanted to remind everybody, Fourth Fridays, I'm trying not to be too close to the microphone, had a request. Fourth Fridays coming up the end of May with the City of Siloam, Main Street, and the Chamber of Commerce, and having music and all kinds of fun stuff. Just keep that in mind because they've got some great things planned. And since I've been discussing things in the community, services and activities and things like that. Last time I mentioned Ability Tree, which I had said I thought was just, offered speech therapy and OT and stuff like that. I had a few people come to me, and I guess I didn't make it very clear that you don't have to have a child with special needs to use Ability Tree. They provide after school care. They have parents' night out. They have something called Stay and Play. So if mom and dad want to come play with their kids, they have a huge gym, an awesome playroom with things where you can play music on the walls and the floors. They have a craft room. They have all kinds of stuff. So there are community memberships too. So it's not necessarily just if your child has special needs, but then they're also really good if your child has special needs and they do a lot in the environment, in the community. They also have Connections University where the kids who are old enough, they partner with JBU. They're young adults. If you need help in the community, like I know for the chamber banquet, kids from Ability Tree were the servers and they did an awesome job. So keep that in mind if there's something that you can use them for. And that would be an awesome thing because they're always looking for opportunities to be in the community and to be helping and things like that. So Ability Tree, they're super nice. I guess this was an advertisement for them, but it's really about the resources we have in the community. Kind at Heart, I love that. I think that sounds awesome. I won't be running the JBU steps. I still have a little PTSD from doing that when I was young. Too many steps for me, but I love helping the elderly. I think we do a great job, like with our senior center and the activities and all the things going on there. And I mentioned this before, and I'll keep mentioning it because I figure somebody out there is going to figure this out. One of the things I feel like we're lacking for the elderly, I know the city has the service to give rides around town. The senior center gives rides around town. The city has the wheelchair accessible van, all of that. But one thing we don't have is what if somebody has a doctor appointment in Fayetteville, Bentonville, Rogers, one of those? That happens a lot. And that can be very difficult for seniors to be able to get to out-of-town appointments. So I'm just going to throw it out there again that that's something I would like to see. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. And before we move to you, Ken, I'm glad you mentioned the taxi service and the elderly that we help, because we did receive a note from one of the ladies that has taken advantage of the service, and I think that we need to let you all know this, and so I'm going to read this to you. I want to thank Siloam Springs for the great taxi service. What would the sick and elderly do without it? I agree. Let's see. I agree. No, it's hard to. We were trying to figure this. Great. It's a great, friendly, helpful, and Buck and Bob are, I guess, the drivers, and they appreciate them and how well they take care of them. The young women, and particularly in friendly schedule the rides are friendly, is what we are saying. Thanks again for just one of the things that makes Siloam Springs a great place to live. And so I wanted to share that with you all. And so they do appreciate what we're doing.
Good.
Ken? Yes. Betsy.
Sorry,
No.
I always forget.
That's fine.
And actually, you reminded me, I had requested a while back that we expand our area to include the planning area for Siloam. Like there are people who have Siloam addresses, but they're not included in the taxi service or any of that. So I had asked, I don't know, a couple of months ago, could we expand it? And it was recommended to expand it to our planning area, which would be another mile or two. Yeah, you know better than I do. 1 mile, the expert says. Yeah, so I wondered if we can do that, and that just help a few more seniors.
It is not going to be as simple as you might think it's going to be.
It's government.
So, but I mean, I think what I will do is I will have Don put together exactly what it would take to do that, because I think it would probably take, we talked about this a little bit, but it's been a while, so I'll just have him bring that back.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Christina.
Thank you. And Ken?
Anything else? Are you sure?
I'll interrupt if I need to.
Again, thank you for your report tonight. That was great. And again, just to follow Carol, our employees are great, second to none. I got to witness firsthand this afternoon their professionalism and their hard work, and it's a good feeling. And you know, people comment about the survey and how good of a place this is. That's not one person. Never has been, never will be. It's everybody in this town working together to the best of their ability to make this town the best that it can be. And it is so good to be a part of that. I wish I could go to the picnic. That sounds like so much fun. But I will be out of town at my son's wedding, and I don't think he would forgive me if I miss that, especially since I'm officiating. I guess I need to be there. Yeah, it's personal problem, I guess. Okay, that's all I have. I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those in favor, same sign. We are adjourned.